Okay, this has been fueled by this essay slash article that was written by a scientist from Occasional Papers, University of Cumbria in the UK. I don't know if I said that right.
Jem Benden. Alan may know him, I don't know.
Jim Benden?
Jem.
Jem
Yeah.
Benden.
It's called, what's it called? Deep.
Adaptation.
Yeah, Deep Adaptation. Navigating Climate Tragedy. You might be interested in the paper.
Yeah, I haven't heard of him, I don't think specifically, but yes, that sounds up my street. So.
Yeah, and I'm in the process of reading it. It's a little bit lengthy. I expected it to be bad, but this punched me in the face. I'm just going to read an excerpt. We do not know for certain how disruptive the impacts of climate change will be or where will be most affected, especially as economic and social systems will respond in complex ways. But the evidence is mounting that the impacts will be catastrophic to our livelihoods and the societies we live within. Our norms of behavior that we call our civilization may also degrade. When we contemplate this possibility, it can seem abstract. The words I ended the previous paragraph may seem, subconsciously at least, to be describing a situation to feel sorry about as we witness scenes on TV or online. But when I say starvation, destruction, migration, disease, and war, I mean your own life. With the power down, you soon wouldn't have water coming out of your tap. You will depend on your neighbors for food and some warmth. You will become malnourished. You won't know where to stay or go. You will fear being violently killed before starving to death. And it really talks about how this is coming faster than we expect. And I don't mean for this to just automatically depress people, because I have a 3-word solution, and that's solar-powered boat. We buy a solar-powered boat, and then we all live on it, and it has a permaculture garden, so we never have to stop for food, and we don't die. That's my solution.
Oh, good.
Really?
People.
No. And that's my thing. I guess the question is, what can we do here at Braziers to improve on that situation, or how much time do you think it will cost to raise money for a solar-powered boat?
Cliff now.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. No, I mean after you, yeah.
I see. Okay, I didn't realise. I thought
that's
it was
all right.
around. I didn't know.
Let's do it. That's all
Um,
right. Okay, we'll do it.
just to fill in a bit more around this paper, and also because I don't think sorry, wrong name. You know that there is a workshop being done on this. I can email you. It's called a deep dive, and it's partly stimulated by this paper, and also by the statement by Antonio Gutierrez recently from the United Nations, and also by the latest IPCC report. And it's looking at how to deal with this, and it's a 5-day workshop or so, and we may be able to join remotely as well. Anyway, so that's just information. I think it's enormously important, and I want to read more around it as to what people are saying about this paper. But when I read it, I thought, well, yeah, that is what I think. What I didn't know, and I still don't know, is the speed at which it will happen and what will happen. But it all rings fairly true. It's just kind of when, really. So it basically ratcheted up my wish for braziers to get a hell of a lot more self-sufficient and to prepare for that by planting things that we may not use now, but we may need at some point in the not too distant future.
I think I've probably been engaged with these issues for 20 years. I think they are very real issues. I don't have the certainty that some people profess. So I think complete social catastrophe is a possibility. I think it's becoming increasingly likely the longer we neglect the necessary steps. But I see it's no more certain than 1,000 other scenarios. I think a lot of the people who get into this understandably have strong emotional reactions and frequently shut down and grab the first nice idea and grip it tightly. But actually it's challenging us to think beyond, and beyond. My view for the last... Interesting, the view I've had... I thought of writing a book about 15 years ago, which I decided not to write because I thought it made the outcomes more likely. I think preparing for disaster in a certain way creates a disaster, or create its own outcome. So how actually to recognise the danger of disaster, but not accelerate it because of the fear of it. I think actually it's a very interesting conundrum. A very careful navigation is needed. I think if there is disaster, actually very few practical things we can do now will make much difference, but the ability to cooperate and create trust and cooperative organisations will be immensely profoundly relevant. Because I think there'll be literally billions of people in need and desperate, and the only way you survive in that is if you have strong bonds with other people. The individuals will starve, and the people in small groups who don't get on with each other will be wiped out by the bigger groups who do get on with each other. And it's the ability to create quickly formed and strongly bonded human organisation is, I think, the key skill that very few people learn and very few people teach. And in our culture, it tends to be politicians or leaders of big corporations who show some of that skill, but they do it all within a context of a society and a system of which they know the rules. And very few people learn how to do it within a spontaneous or organic state. I think there's an enormous gulf of learning there. And as I would like, the obvious thing for Brazier is to set up a series of evenings or events where it's possible actually to explore with some care and depth some of the different elements of this. Because it's not just one broad brush thing. I think there are all sorts of different impacts and possible responses to be felt through and thought through.
Well, I don't know whether you meant that self-sufficiency is one of those nice ideas which we cling to, but it struck me as still a nice idea anyway. I'm quite interested to see what would happen if Brazier's went more in that direction than it's been lately. We used to do chickens and pigs, didn't we? Well, maybe that's not an option. I don't know. Anyway.
Sorry, I'm just making sure I have enough memory to finish this because it's.
Okay.
One of the things I hated the most about the Mormon Church was that they saw the second coming and Armageddon as inevitable. And so all the Mormons, including my family, have massive, they're like 6 months of food storage. Well, I don't know if it's that much for every family, but I hated this because there was no focus on preventing, saving the earth. But as some of these articles are saying, we're already past that point. I think it'd be cool if we could make Brazier's completely self-sufficient. Obviously, figuring out our own water, growing more food. As a lot of this education research has been going through my mind, it comes up again and again that the education that is needed these days is the education of food and shelter. Basic food and shelter and maintenance and living environments. And I would be happy if that was a focus of Brazier's education. and maybe it could be used as a selling point with these news, these warnings in the news. Anyways, that's what I have to say.
I haven't actually read the paper, but I would like to read that paper once you're finished with it. No, judging by what you have said, it is scary. You know, they're going to end up in that manner, you know. It's like that movie we watched, The Green, whatever it was, that movie. What was that movie? The Green what?
Soil.
You know, Green Soil.
Soil?
Yeah, no, is it soil? Yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's, I hate to think about it, but, yeah, well. If you have to get prepared, I don't know, it's quite scary when I think about it, actually. But as you said, you know, they are coming up with a workshop on how to, if you can use the word counteract on it or whatever. But I don't know, frankly, I really don't know how much people can do if it's going to come down to that. You know, if we're going to come down to that level, how much can you actually do to salvage the devastation or whatever it is? I don't know. But I think it's quite scary anyway. It's like Armageddon. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what we're up against, really. It's too scary, so I don't want to think about it. And what good can we do, even if we try? I think there are some pretty bad things happening in the world at the moment. There are some good things. Don't get me wrong. My personal view is I love being alive, whichever world I'm in. But I think while you are alive, you have certain obligations to make the world better. And I think we should be doing that whether there is a threat of global catastrophe or not, really. It obviously does, well, it should help to get the what's the word?
Motivation?
No.
Rectify.
I always say it as well. It might come back to me.
Say it in a long sentence, maybe we can.
It's quite ironic that I can't think of this word because it means kind of the opposite of urgency. There's no urgency. Sorry. Got there in the end. How to create urgency, that is, without scaring people. But I do think without consciously trying to, Braziers does do its bit towards it. Obviously, it can do a lot more. We have people at least visiting us because they think we're doing towards, which counts for something. I mean, we had a very interesting chap from Australia, and we had the chap John with alternative economics. But yeah, when this threat of we need more money quickly came up. Suddenly the go-to reaction was, how are we going to make more money? And I always thought, well, the other side of the coin is, how can we save more money? Because really, if things are going to stop being available to us that are now, it's best to be able to do without them before it happens. And if that saves money now, when money still means something, well, that's even better. But yeah, I don't think the urgency in this room or the urgency in that paper is shared within this community as a whole, or this society as a whole. What's wrong with making the world a better place anyway? Is the counter argument, really? But I think we're trying, and we should get some points for that. But we're definitely not trying hard enough.
Oh gosh, such an accumulation of points as we've been round. But just to pick up on your urgency, because that's been one of the heartening phenomena, possibly heartening of the last few weeks. In fact, that very pessimistically titled article of George Monbiot was in response to the activities of the, what do they call it, the Extinction Rebellion group, which at least seems to be predominantly a youngish persons group, people in their late teens and 20s, and at least it's this kind of thing that I've been wondering, is everybody so tranquilised that they haven't even thought of doing something like this? But it seems an intelligent and well-organised group. It could just snowball and really have a political effect in the comparative short term. But certainly, if braziers were able to be some sort of bolt hole or conference centre or any such similar function for those extinction rebellion persons, that would be very good. I signed up to their website on the first date I heard about it. I think I've not yet sent them any money, but I'm also trying to keep track of what they're doing, and they've certainly manifested. There was the closing down of the 5 bridges in London. That's a very intelligent kind of approach. And a major conference had been held in Edinburgh just last Saturday. So I was able to mention that to the Quakers up in Edinburgh. And there have been the beginnings of demonstrations, I think, at least in places like Manchester and so on. So that seems hopeful in itself. Just to go back to Cliff's kind comments on to make conscious in ourselves. In that statement, there is no ought. There is no ought in it. It may well be that I'm guilty of saying it in the kind of way that implies it is all about an ought, rather than a sort of joyous perception of, as I thought in 1956 and said to my brother when I first heard it, look, that sounds like a pretty good stab at a description of the function of human beings in the universe. The function of a human being is, among other things, to make conscious in ourselves. The rest of creation, so far as we tell, it is not or cannot quite be making things conscious in the way that it's our unique privilege to do. A human being is a bird's way of appreciating birds more. A human being is a fish's way of appreciating fish more, etc., etc. I think that's enough. But I should apologise if I'm guilty of saying that phrase in a sort of, this is dead boring, of course, but this is just something that we really ought to be doing, and we always hate things that we ought to be doing. Quite the reverse. It's pointing towards a source of joy and joy in being. Okay.
Yes. It seems to me that it's difficult to live in a house which was designed for the aristocracy, designed for a hierarchy. Now, poor people wouldn't have been allowed in this room, you know, in years gone by. And we've now crossed that gap, although most of us has come from poor homes. We're now living in a mansion, and we're finding it rather fun. And we don't really want to think about the fact that there are a lot of people in the world with next to nothing, you know? We'd rather concentrate on putting the right tree in the right hole for the right reason, for the person to represent the right people. You know, that's all to do with living in a mansion. We've got to see ourselves as trying to help people to live healthy lives with very little, because very soon all of us will have very little.
Thank you for that comment, Hugh. That was really good. That laid down the law.
Are we going to follow the law?
Just a term of expression. A lot to think about, an interesting thing for me is, yes, everyone had quite an emotional reaction, which is natural. But when you're presented with facts, how you feel about them doesn't change them, unfortunate as it may be. And it's a lot easier to avoid facts that we don't want to hear or will remind us of things we don't like to think about. But all the same, it's something that's happening and something that's continuing to happening, whether we see it or not, or whether we want to feel it or not. And to Cliff's point about the book, I find that very interesting that you didn't choose to publish it because you were afraid it would cultivate fear and then, in a way, cultivate stagnance and apathy. Where I think there's a difference between denial and just not. There's a difference between doing something out of purely fear and then doing something as a measure of acceptance and then protecting yourself, especially in this situation where there's a possibility of people attacking other people once society has gone downhill and malnourishment and diseases are rampant. There's a difference between that being sped up out of fear and, people automatically just giving up on saving the environment and going into survival mode, whatever that would be, and just accepting the fact that this may be out of our control no matter how much ecological work we do. We can't control, what they're dumping in the rivers in India. We can't control what's happening in China and other places. And, even if we do our best, it might not be enough. And to a certain extent, we just have to accept that and not prepare for the worst, but just educate ourselves. We won't starve if we know how to grow things. And we won't starve if we know how to identify edible plants and how to filter water, etc., etc. If we keep ourselves educated and learn how to protect ourselves, we should still be okay.
I'm suggesting name is wound it up, but whoever wants, if somebody's got something important to say, then maybe Sarah should be the last.
No, I actually had a question for Cliff, actually.
Okay, well, Cliff the last then. Okay.
No, we go on to it.
You really think so?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. It's interesting.
If everybody's got the energy for it, then fine. Okay, I'll shut up. Okay.
Well, I had a question about you talked about a series of evenings or talking about it at Braziers, which I would like to see, and you also talked about people who can cooperate and teaching people to cooperate, which is something, yes, that sounds wonderful, but it's always escaped me, and I'm always kind of wary of people who teach people to cooperate, so I'm curious about that.
Before I even think about those questions, what I wanted to say was, one of the things I've been involved with, I'm not sure when, was founding a charity that's whole purpose is around the communication of climate change. One of the very strongest messages they try telling everyone who's communicating climate change is that urgency and alarm and fear stimulate a lot of activity for a short while, but human individuals and human societies do not function well in a state of fear and emergency for very long. If people can sustain it for 9 months or 18 months, that's an achievement. But actually the way we function, we'll go into what's called apathy or denial or switch off, rather than stay in a state of fear. That's a very normal, healthy human response. So the challenge is how to communicate the need for action without putting the goad of fear in, that actually then just causes people to switch off. And it's still a work in progress in terms of how to communicate optimism and possibilities and a sense that actually what we want to do to respond to the crisis is itself something we want to do. So there have been quite a few funny cartoons around climate change saying, so if we want to solve climate change, we need to do this, this and this. But actually we want those anyway. So one thing is less enormous inequality and less stimulus for more economic growth and consumerism and spiritual poverty. In other words, the things that we need to do to change the crisis are things we probably all want anyway. So actually focusing on this is worth doing now, even if this whole place burns down in 5 years' time. By which I mean England, I don't mean this house. I'm also struck that who we mean by us or we changes for each of us in each moment. And every time we say we, and we don't mean everyone, we're actually slipping into the very problem that we're trying to address. As soon as we create an other who's causing the problem, and we who are the solution, we are creating the problem again. In other words, our awareness has to be that we mean all of us. Unless we all get our act together, we're all doomed. To me, that's a very simple underpinning. And it's helpful always to remember, when I'm saying us, who do I really mean? Sarah, what were your questions?
Well, you were talking about having evenings to look at stuff, and you were also talking about how nobody's teaching people to cooperate. Well, I'm simplifying.
Yeah. I've seen, if you've decided, I want to learn how to be part of a cooperative group, where's the evening class or the online course or the weekend to go on to do it? I don't think you'll find it. As in, I don't think it's up there as an explicit skill that people have a hunger for, although a lot of people say they'd like to live in a state of higher community where other people have learned to cooperate and live with them. And a lot of people will be sent on team building courses so that because other people want them to be more productive as a group. But it's also like we're not recognising we have an appetite for us each to gain the skills of leadership and cooperation. And I think living and working here fosters some of those skills, but also Brazes has a habit of not wanting to learn from outside. The habit's not so strong now as it used to be, such that there'll be resistance to learning any new skills because we already do it. But actually we need to learn, this is kindergarten, and we need to get to graduate level. You know, there's a great need to learn much more deeply how to unlock each other's creativity and not get hooked into the actually quite pointless little disputes that hold us all back. And I'm sure at the moment, if we advertise 6 evenings over the next 3 months looking at these issues, there'd be an appetite for it. There'd be people who say, yes, I want to spend an evening making sense of the Extinction Rebellion. I want to spend an evening making sense of the latest climate change news, which is suggesting it's worse than we thought. And that could develop some momentum.
Yeah, one of the things when I went back to Utah 2 weeks ago that I was just shocked by was the amount of expansion and consumerism that I was just blind to before Braziers. I mean, Utah is one of the fastest growing states and economically strong states, growing-wise. But still, it was just shocking to see whole mountains full of big houses for tiny families. And I felt some kind of death in the land, even though it was a desert and it was just filled with houses and new lights and new trees and new lawns. One thing, I think the core principle here is this core principle that underlies all of this is the principle of division and the way our minds divide ourselves from the rest of the world and groups from other groups. And one thing we talked about in this education forum meeting today was, well, one thing I said is when I was asked about the Braziers ethos, and this just came to my mind, I don't think anyone's actually said this, but that we focus more on group success or group learning rather than individual learning. And that by just being a part of a community and this idea of creating a group mind or a multi-mental social organism does something. There is an emergent property, even if it's hard to see it with our individual minds. But I think we are doing a great thing for the world, even if it's too late, or even if we're not doing it on a huge scale. But I hope that we see that when these yoga guests come in for the weekend, that they are experiencing something different, like what Will said, an alternative form of living that is good for the world, better for the world, even though we don't do it perfectly. But it is just opening that up to their minds, and hopefully, I wish we could do it faster. And yeah.
Sorry, let's see.
I can't forget what I want to say, but when you were speaking it, I'd still like us to have the list of the things we're actually doing that is either making a positive impact or less of a negative one on display somewhere. So our energy, our heating system, perhaps, etc., etc. That used to be there. I know it doesn't help to make these things happen, but it's a bit of motivation and inspiration. And the guests that come on the weekends can see and we get their toilet paper from this supplier. Maybe I'll have a look. It felt quite good. And I think Braziers is sounding like it's calling for the return of the one and only Bruce Woody Wood. A character I dearly miss. He welcomed the oncoming global crisis because he saw it as the only way to end kind of the unstoppable forces of capitalism and globalism and things. And if it has to get worse before it gets better, bring it on. If we need to lose a large portion of the population before the rest can survive for the foreseeable future, bring it on. I feel quite excited. We haven't really answered the original question of about the boat, but I'm afraid I won't be on the boat. I'm afraid it sounds lovely, but I don't want to run away. I want to stay and see what happens. I think it's going to be a fascinating period in human history. and I want to be around to see what I can do. I'm not that bothered about surviving or not. All for one. There was one more thing I wanted to say. But I've forgotten. Sorry. Oh, another thing, yes. Sorry, one last thing. I don't think we can save the world, etc., through fear. As Cliff said, urgency that comes through fear is not really going to work for very long. We need to do it through love, of course. It's a cliche, but fear, but love can be quite urgent. It can be passionate, and I think if people love more, then they will want to protect it more, and they should do that whether it's in jeopardy or not. I think.
Yeah, just good. I don't know. As I was looking at everybody and they were, engaged in the conversation, I was just thinking it would be nice if we had some university students around as well. It's just a thought that came into my mind because you're talking on a level that's pretty, I mean, when I was in university, we were talking about this sort of thing. It would be good if we can invite some university students over, exchange ideas with them. I don't know, it just occurred to me when we were doing this that I thought it might be a good idea. Hearing their views about things. It just occurred to me, that's all.
I think Nat wanted to.
Oh, yeah.
We've got the university student here.
I don't know if I should say this, but I frequently worry about whether Nameless over here is going to cheat on me or break up with me. And
This is sensory.
but it applies. It applies to what I think Will was just.
Doesn't.
Yes, it does, because
We might as well talk about it since we're already on it.
no, it's about fearing the end of the world and having the world right now. I think it's yeah. I guess I shouldn't go further into that, but yeah. Anyways, I was just gonna say, whenever I'm fearing, Nameless over here breaking up with me, that's when I am the most unloving, anxious person, not fun to be around, blah 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 blah, unhealthy, and not helping the community as much as I should be. But I also wanted to say that religion. One thing I love about Braziers is its secularness, and yet although we do not have a purpose or mission at the tip of our tongues as I would like us to, we are yet unified at some level, or unified on a level of survival. Maybe we not very consciously or proactively. I lost my train of thought because I got embarrassed talking about that thing. But I think there is, because religion is very powerful. And Cliff was saying, how do we get people to do lasting change without fear? Right, fear lasts 9 months, but this Mormon church, I mean, they've lasted 170 plus years. Oh, actually, 170, and some 13 million followers, and I would say a majority of those very strongly proactive in following their beliefs. And sadly, their beliefs for them it's more important to talk about Jesus than to save the earth around them. At least that's how I view it. So I don't know. I want to think more about that. I shouldn't be rambling on.
Yeah, can I, just pass it. You're talking about fear. I think I have fears as well, to be perfectly honest. I think everybody has fears. Just some of us do not voice our opinions on the fears that we have. So maybe one day we can have a fear day, I don't know. And everybody talk about the fears that they have. you know. But I do have my fears as well. I just don't talk about it. That's all. Yeah.
Thank you. I forgot what I was gonna say. Yeah, I think it just so this has elicited a lot of productive discussion on climate change, and I think there's different consistencies of fear. I think the fear that you were talking about, Cliff, is more of like a panic fear, like ah, like the kind where you're running around and trying to put out a fire type fear, whereas Knack's fear is more one that goes hand in hand with love as well, because you fear a God that you also love. And I think that really extends the measure to generations. There's generations of families that have been born under religion, and it just keeps mounting and mounting. So if we can bind our fear of the world ending with our love of the world, then I think that would be much more productive. And yeah, I'd love to see some relevant courses at Braziers on climate change, on being self-sufficient and growing more of our own food, learning how to filter water, how to start fires, you know, that type of stuff. Very pragmatic courses would be great. Yeah. All right. I think so.